And I want to ask you also about the fundamental lie of our system, because Democratic Party, during the primary, if you played the drinking game, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Obviously, the Republican Party, it's always how are you going to pay for it? Well, snap your fingers. Some people say it was a $2 trillion plan. When you talk about the leveraging capability, a $6 trillion plan. They certainly didn't worry about how you're going to pay for this in terms of a corporate bailout. But now, the difference between European countries and us, when they have those cyclical crashes, at least they have health care to fall back on. We don't even have health care. And this mad rush to reopen the economy, well, if they're going to reopen the economy, don't you kind of need customers to make money? How are they going to have enough customers to even meet overhead? My parents own a small business. Even if they got a small business loan, which they haven't yet, if you don't have enough customers, or let's say people still have their jobs but are tightening their belt for the portion of the society that haven't lost their jobs, what does that do, having empty tables at restaurants and the rest?
Yeah, nobody has thought anything through. Please be aware that in 2009, under the first year of Obama's presidency, they did the same. They spent $1 trillion, heaved it at the economy, didn't worry about what the consequences were, and the consequences were part of what led to the crash now. I mean, you are literally in a kind of spiral. Every problem is handled by literally creating trillions of dollars, pumping them into the economy, hoping, therefore, to keep this broken refrigerator going for another few months, and not saying, look, I'm not going to worry about the long-term effects, because if we can't get through this crisis, there is no long-term. It's like a candidate running for president. He doesn't, or she doesn't worry about the general election, because if they can't win the primary, the general election is a dead letter. It has no effect. I think it's important for me as a professor of economics to let everybody understand we are in utterly uncharted territory. We came out of the Great Depression of the 1930s believing that we had learned certain key lessons of how to manage capitalism so it wouldn't have these kinds of crashes every 4 to 7 years, that they wouldn't periodically be of the immense destructive potential that they were in the 1930s. We've tried everything. In the depth of the 30s, we even came up with a whole new kind of economics called Keynesian economics after the British economist who developed them in the midst of the Great Depression. None of it worked. The reasons we have a crash now, or that we've had 3 in the last 20 years, is because we are no better able to prevent these absurd crashes now than we were 100 or 200 years ago, which is another reason to ask the question, why are we willing to continue? If you lived with a roommate as unstable as capitalism, you would have moved out years ago. You have to begin to ask people, what's the matter? Why are you stuck? It's like being stuck in a relationship that you kind of know is over. Whatever it was, it has now reached a point that both of you would be better off, going your own way. But it's very difficult. I understand, very difficult. The unknown future is scarier than the known, even if the known isn't so good anymore, etc. All of that is understandable. But when you get to a point where you are literally being faced with choices that are staggeringly bad on the one hand and staggeringly bad on the other, you need to understand you've come to a decision point. You've come to a time when you really have to make a kind of break, because otherwise you're in a valley of dead ends.
And tomorrow's May 1st.
Right.
I don't really understand how this is sustainable from the point of view of, let's say, okay, if you just take it at face value, 30 million Americans are unemployed. It's obviously more than that, and will end up more than that. More people are having their hours cut back. More people will end up having to take a pay cut, lose benefits, those kinds of things. Aren't these the conditions where you would see something like a mass rent strike or a general strike? Because even if you don't have an organized rent strike, at a certain point, it's just going to be a rent strike by default because people can't pay their rent. So
you are seeing it.
Yeah.
Let me respond. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've already seen, as you yourself just pointed to, people are taking action. There are a group of Amazon workers refusing to go to the warehouse, a group of Instacart people refusing to make the deliveries, employees in a variety of places simply not willing to take the risks to their family's health, et cetera, et cetera. But you're seeing more than that. In Chicago, a huge apartment complex, the people living there organized, they're not going to pay the rent. And the way they're going to handle it is nobody is. So you got thousands of families, all of whom, and the minute, of course, it becomes a mass phenomena, you can't deal with it by punishing, though there's too many people, and you're at risk. So the landlords can't act. Okay, I have some friends who are doing something in Jackson, Mississippi. It's called Cooperation Jackson, a very important project down there. African-American community moving. They've called for a general strike tomorrow, May 1st, but a kind of rolling general strike. Every few weeks, maybe the first of every month, they want to mobilize people, maybe to make caravans in automobiles, because that gets you the social distancing you need to be safe, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of activities. I noticed that the meat packers union, in response to Trump telling them they have to go work, the union said, no, we won't. Wow. If you're beginning to mobilize labor unions, African-American communities, social movements in and out of the unions, you're beginning to get the kind of response you're asking about. We are suffering because for the last 70 years, the Cold War did a very good job of destroying leftist organizations. The government did it, the private sector did it, the police did it, the FBI did it. You destroyed the old Communist Party, you basically destroyed the two socialist parties, and you eviscerated the labor movement. Unions represented a third of workers in 1955, and today they represent less than 10%. So you have destroyed the coalition that came together in the Great Depression. So in a sense, folks now have to start kind of from scratch. That takes time, but you're seeing it, and it is suddenly going very fast.
And, you know, you look at what just transpired in the election, there's a dynamic of mostly older voters, no offense to your generation, who on the policies were for progressive policies like Medicare for all, minimum wage raise, all these things. But, you know, we're kind of socially and frankly by the media programmed to go for a moderate to right-wing candidate like Joe Biden. But those people are also losing their jobs. Those people are also losing their health care. Do you think this might be something that could kind of bring that under 50 voting bloc that has gravitated over the last 5 years towards the Bernie Sanders progressive wing, with that older generation that has been kind of programmed to think that, well, we got to just eat our broccoli and can't expect, real structural change?
Well, I'm hoping. If you ask me honestly, do I think it's going to happen? Here's what I think. More and more Americans have no choice but to face the fact that Mr. Trump is the Republican and Mr. Biden is the Democrat, at least as far as the people who control those two parties go.
Right.
The controlling people in the Republican Party lined up now behind Trump, and the controlling people in the Democratic Party have lined up now behind Biden, who's one of them. Okay, I understand that. But that is those two parties on the basic question of capitalism are, for me, indistinguishable. They disagree about how best to support capitalism. Yeah, they do. And I can have my preference as to which one of them is supporting capitalism in a way I would prefer. But since I'm interested in getting a better system, in doing better than capitalism can do and has done, these two parties are meaningless to me. So for me, the difference is such that the only conclusion I draw is we need a party that is able to be critical of capitalism and advocate for something reasonable as an alternative, better system. Look, we had slavery and then people struggled and we got a better system. We had feudalism, people struggled, we got a better system. We've had capitalism for 3.5 centuries now, people have struggled, and we can do better than this. There's no reason to assume that history has come to an end. That's a level of arrogance and self-confidence that requires mental attention. That's silly. So for me, I think we can do better. The human race is capable of doing better. It can go beyond this system. I want a political movement and a party. I think people are so turned off that we're going to get two reactions. One of them you already see. It's Bernie, it's Elizabeth Warren, it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all of that. But the other reaction, which is very scary for me, is even greater resignation, distancing, turning away from all of politics as a kind of cesspool of irrelevance. And there, I must tell you, as a professor, a significant number of my students, including those who in the classroom will tell you how excited they are by Ocasio-Cortez or by Bernie or what. When I say to them, well, let me ask you a question. Are you registered to vote? Look at me, giggle, and tell me no. Because in a very real sense, they already assumed that somebody who could be exciting, like Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie or Elizabeth Warren, would be shot down by the political establishment. So that they were exciting, but they never really took seriously that these people could be leaders of a movement that could make change. What needs to happen is changes brought about by mass action, even if the changes are relatively modest, could have an enormous effect in dealing with this sense that change cannot happen, that the old people who run things have it locked down, and that we, coming up, we just can't do it. We're not even able now to live at the standard of living our parents enjoyed or to have the aspirations our parents indulged. It's not available to us. That kind of defeatism or fatalism or resignation, whatever word you want, for me, that's the big problem. It's not convincing people that a better alternative to capitalism is worth it and exists. They believe that. Mm-hmm. But that it's feasible to get it, that they don't believe yet.
Let me ask you, lastly, to me, the opposition party, which we don't really have at this point, the Democratic Party, is a major problem here because if Trump and his negligence have put the patient, the American people, in critical condition, the nurse or one of the nurses or doctors, the Democratic Party, is throwing morphine at a patient in critical condition. Nancy Pelosi, we could go into it. She's, COBRA expansion, which, okay, there's still deductibles and copays. If I don't have a job, how am I going to pay for that? Crumbs, when universal basic income was mentioned to her, it's like she saw a ghost. What, in the short term, if you had your way, what is the immediate best program? Is it UBI? Is it Rashida Tlaib has put forward kind of a recurring debit card that would be refilled until we're out of this? Is it the government paying 80 to 90% of payrolls like we're seeing in Europe? A combination of all. What should be done that there's still time to do?
Well, I think you put your finger on it. I would say all of them, or as many of them as we could get through Here's the way to think about it in terms of economics, which is what I know. All three of the crashes in this 21st century have been handled by throwing a vast amount of money into the economy. But the vast majority of that money has gone to the richest people and the biggest corporations. And the idea was this is a way to manage a broken economy because the benefits we give to the top will, here we go, trickle down and eventually benefit everyone. The alternative to that has always been trickle up, don't trickle down. Give the bulk of the money to those at the bottom because they will then immediately, because they're at the bottom, spend that money for their rent, for their food, for their clothes, for their transportation, and so on. And that will make profits for corporations. So the money, in a sense, trickles up. Both of those policies can fail. But the benefit of the second one, trickle up, is that, yeah, they may not get the economy back, but they help the people who need it most. What we have with trickle down is if they fail, which, by the way, they have meanwhile benefited the people who need it least. The absurdity of that is another testimony to a capitalist system. And I think the mass of people, on the one hand, would welcome a trickle up policy change of the sort that Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden, they really can't even understand it. They've been so distant from all of that way of thinking, even though it's the history of the Democratic Party in the 1930s, that they get mentally confused when the question is raised because they're so out of practice of even thinking about it. But here is sort of the final point I would want to leave with you. I think the mass of people are skeptical. And they're skeptical in a way I would phrase this way. When you say, come, join us for a trickle-up policy, in so many words, they look at you and they say, no, thank you. We've been there and we've done that. That's what the 1930s were. You know, in the midst of a depression, the unions, the two socialist parties, the Communist Party went to Roosevelt and they said, you better do something for the people that are suffering, because if you don't, we'll kick you out of the White House and we may make a revolution. Okay? So Roosevelt was a smart politician. He knew that they were speaking for what the reality of politics was. So he created in 1933 the Social Security system. We never had that before. You're 65 years of age or older, we're going to give you a check every month for the rest of your life. He created unemployment compensation. We had never had that before either. He created the first minimum wage to make sure people got paid properly, and then he created a federal employment program in which he hired from 34 to 41, 15 million people. Okay, what was the result? The result was we didn't go fascist in this country. We had a New Deal, and it created a middle class. But that middle class now understands that what they got in the 1930s and early 40s was subsequently taken away from them. The New Deal was undone. You can't ask the working class to go fight for another New Deal, whether or not it's green, because that's not enough. We can't be struggling like crazy for 10 years to get something that is then taken away from us. You got to give us a program that gives us at least the hope that the struggle for these reforms will not be undone. And the only way to do that is to take the power and the profits away from private capitalists, because their power and their profits and the capitalist system give them every incentive to undo the reforms, those reforms we can even win, and the profits give them the means to realize their incentive. And that's what they did in the last 50 years. Something has to be spoken about that, so the mass of people who are angry now, who are open, have a feeling that they're not being asked to do something to which you respond, I've been there, I've done that. I'm not doing it again.
Professor Wolff, thanks so much for taking the time. Really wise words. And I agree with you. The biggest fear is people getting complacent and hopeless. So we need to work against that. Thank you once again. Democracy at Work. People should check it out. You have a YouTube channel too, right?
Yes, you just go to the YouTube and look up Democracy at Work. You'll see all the work we do. Democracyatwork.info is the website.
Great. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. And do send us a link. We'd love to promote and all that.
Absolutely.
Okie doke. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.